We are, as we do at this time of day, standing by to hear from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He is expected today to respond to some of the urgent appeals to support various industries across Canada. For weeks, as his government has been rolling out emergency aid for Canadian businesses and workers, the Prime Minister has also been promising sectoral help for certain industries that have been hit particularly hard by the COVID-19 shutdown. All right, let me bring in my colleagues as we stand by and wait for the Prime Minister, the host of Power and Politics, Vashi Kapellas, and the CBC's Salima Shivji, both here. Vashi, I'll start with you. So I don't think this is a oil and gas specific announcement from what I am hearing, but there will be components that will help Alberta and other places.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why I think we've all been asking various people in government, is this going to be targeted, Rosie, to oil and gas? Back at the end of March, I think it was the 25th or 26th, the Finance Minister, Bill Morneau, said help for the oil patch would be coming in hours or days. That didn't materialize. There is sort of a double whammy when it comes to the oil patch right now, not just because of COVID-19 and decreased demand for oil, much decreased demand, but also this price war that emerged between Russia and Saudi Arabia that kind of got resolved last week, but didn't really end up buoying oil prices. So they are at basically all-time lows. There's a point at which a barrel of Canadian oil, for example, was selling for less than $5. So the idea was, is there going to be, or the question rather raised to the government is going to be, is there specific help for the sector? And what might that help look like? There has been two kind of specific asks for it. The first is around orphan wells. So these are sites that the company ended up going broke and they didn't end up cleaning up. It's estimated the cleanup of those sites could cost billions of dollars, upwards of $8 billion, I think, one assessment put out there. The Alberta government is putting some money, or has announced that some money would be directed to it. So there is the anticipation or the expectation that the federal government will chip in on that endeavor. I don't know to what degree. The second big ask, particularly from industry, is around liquidity for producers that have had to shelve capital projects, for example, or are trying to keep employees on the payroll. There's the wage subsidy that they can access, but they've also asked for help with liquidity. It'll be interesting to see if that's part of this announcement. But like you said, Rosie, there are indications so far that this won't necessarily be a big package targeted specifically at the oil sector, that there's also an announcement coming from the Prime Minister that would be aimed at helping people who the CERB or the emergency business loan have missed. And we have certainly heard from a lot of those people. Think of some musicians, for example, or others in the culture sector, that kind of thing. So I'm going to be looking to see, what exactly the announcement where those people are concerned involves. But also, really, I know that there are lots of people in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador who are looking for some sector-specific help, and to what degree will this announcement address that?
Yeah, it does not sound like a quote-unquote bailout for oil and gas today. There will be some sort of measures there, as you suggested, to help them along, but it will be, from what we are hearing anyway, a much broader way of helping different industries that have been hit in different ways. And you alluded to the cultural sector, but tourism would be another good example, and there are certainly others. Salima, are we expecting that this? I mean, this should be fairly substantive, I would guess, too, if we're talking about multi-sectors and many ministers showing up at the noon press conference.
Yeah, we're hearing it's across many sectors, multiple sectors, and really that's been the focus from the government from the get-go. As Vashi mentioned, Finance Minister Bill Morneau did talk about, help for the oil and gas sector coming within hours. That was now 3 long weeks ago. But whenever the government has been talking about this, they've been framing it as help for multiple vulnerable industries, as you mentioned, tourism, the culture sector as well. And the focus always has been really on workers, so getting people back working on this. So we're hearing, regional development will play a part in this in terms of, as Vashi was mentioning, what certain areas are really feeling more particularly. If certain tourism provinces that focus on tourism,
Sure.
people aren't going on tour buses and people aren't signing up to go into museums and whatnot. So
Yeah.
really the focus on workers and that in particular across a broad spectrum of sectors that are really hard hit by this.
And one of the things the government has said is that the first priority was to try and get money to individuals, and that's what we saw with the CERB ERB. The second priority was to try and get help to businesses, and now we're broadening out to larger industries. And I don't know if that includes even the airline industry, which, as we know, is waiting to tap into the wage subsidy benefit, which is not working yet, up and running yet. But maybe they also are looking for some substantive money. I'll come back to both of you, but while we wait to hear more from the Prime Minister about these details of various industries, Vashi talked a little bit there about what could happen, what the federal government could be interested in doing to help Alberta. But let us go to Alberta to talk about what they are asking for, because we know that the economy has been hit very hard, not only by oil prices, but also the pandemic, sort of a double whammy rather in that part of the country. And Jason Kenney has said that it's possible that employment there, the unemployment rate hits 25%, which would be just astounding. The CBC's Carolyn Dunn joins me from Calgary. All right, Carolyn, I know you talk to people in the industry regularly, and there have been a lot of asks. It doesn't sound like this is the big package that they maybe were looking for, but there'll be something here.
Well, I think that's what I'm watching for. Is this going to be parceled out as a giant industry package, or are we going to sort of start out smaller today and kind of build to those big announcements with airlines, et cetera? But what Alberta is asking for is very clear, $20 to $30 billion package. Likely a lot of that will be around liquidity, around backstopping credit, around low interest loans, that kind of thing. And you mentioned the fallout for workers, an unemployment rate of up to 25% or beyond, which is astounding. And I guess for industry, if they don't get some immediate help with their liquidity, then they're going to start, already we're going to be losing oil and gas companies guaranteed, but even it's going to accelerate, and it could even be the big ones. We're also hearing from industry that they would like to see a freeze in the carbon tax, as well as a delay in, climate and pollution regulations, which is coming under some criticism as, perhaps the industry using this pandemic crisis, to kind of get through the back door, what it couldn't get through through the front door. But what's really interesting is that orphan well package, and I expect that we might hear from the Prime Minister today on that. There are more than 150,000 orphan wells in Alberta. Those are wells that have basically been abandoned, and they're not being serviced. They're just kind of sitting, wrecking farmers' fields, really. And it would be, billions of dollars, perhaps $8 billion to remediate those. But what it might mean at this time is sort of a double win. That would put oil workers back to work cleaning those up, and it would get them cleaned up. Normally, it would come under a lot of criticism that taxpayers are paying to clean up the mess that oil companies left. But these are not normal times, as you know. So it might actually, if there is some help for orphan wells, it could actually, help the industry by keeping people working and deal with a real environmental problem here in Alberta.
Yeah, it would do a couple of things all at once, that's for sure. Okay, thank you for that, Carolyn Dunn. You're going to stand by in case we need to get back to you. Appreciate it, Carolyn Dunn in Calgary. As we wait for the Prime Minister, though, expected in about 7 minutes, let me go to Kathy Duke. She is CEO of Destination St. John's. It's the agency that works hard to try and bring in visitors to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And obviously, like all places across this country, it is a tough challenge in these difficult times because tourism and visiting places isn't really something that's happening. Kathy, good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
No, a pleasure. So I wonder, how are things there? Obviously, your industry, what you're doing, just isn't happening right now.
Absolutely. The impact of COVID-19 on our tourism industry here in Newfoundland and Labrador has really been devastating. The tourism industry is very important to the province. We have maybe 20,000 people working in the industry, maybe 2,500 small businesses. The organization that I work for, Destination St. John's, represents the St. John's region. And we certainly have felt it here. Many of our hotels are closed. Which was amazing that could happen, and it's happening right across the country. Many of the others that are still open are operating at 2 to 5%. Our restaurants and pubs, retail businesses on Water Street or downtown core are closed, and they're all very, very worried that they may not even be around when our tourism industry starts.
And how much money comes into Newfoundland and Labrador from tourism? I know it's a place everyone wants to visit in normal times, so I would imagine I imagine you do pretty well.
Yeah. Sure. Well, the revenues that come in annually to the industry is about $1.3 billion. In St. John's, we really depend on the business. For example, in meetings and conventions, we may do 100 conventions a year, and that would bring in about $40 or $50 million just in that sector in St. John's. So it's pretty significant.
So what could the government do, or what have you been asking the government to do that would be of help for this particular industry? And obviously, you're just one example, but this is happening across the country.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that the travel and tourism industry was the first industry hit the hardest. With the complete shutdown of travel, it's just unbelievable, the impact. And that's had a ripple effect, as I said, through other businesses who also serve our travelers when they come to our destinations. We're working with the Tourism Industry Association of Canada and putting together some of these ideas to be presented to government. I think that one of the things that we have to understand is that we need an immediate response because many of our businesses won't even be around when our tourism industry starts. And then we need to have that recovery plan, that marketing recovery plan. So I think that, for example, the 75% wage subsidy is wonderful, but I think that for many of our tourism operators, they'll need that following June 6th. They'll need it over the summer. So there are things like that that I think are unique, if you will, to the tourism industry, that we need to see some extended programs around those.
Are you, the Prime Minister is talking about weeks still of having to live under these very strict public health restrictions. Can this happen still for weeks, or is there any pressure coming from any of your members to get the economy up and running again?
Oh, I think that, if we had our druthers, we'd have things started tomorrow, of course. The tourism industry representatives that we work with are really just trying to get a handle on when things are going to turn around. And I think Destination Canada is doing a lot of work around that. People are thinking it may not start till July or August, others the fall, and some are saying that there won't be any visitation till 2021. We do know that as travel comes back, it'll be mostly domestic travelers. It won't be international. And that's good for Newfoundland and Labrador in that 80% of our visitors have traditionally come from Canada. So we really need to be really targeted to the traveler. We understand that visitors would prefer to drive rather than fly. There's going to be a huge emphasis on space, social distancing, cleanliness. Sure. So I think all of our tourism operators have to rethink who the new traveler is. So we really will need some help as we do that. It'll cost us a lot more to do the kind of things that we're going to have to do for the individual traveler than we did in the past.
Okay, Kathy Duke. Well, I will happily come back to Water Street anytime I can get there. Sending your province all the best. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We'd love to have you. Thank you.
Okay, Kathy Duke is CEO of Destinations St. John's, the agency in charge of tourism for that province, which is, of course, another sector that has been hit hard. And just to give you a sense of how bad things are, and then I'll bring in Vashi, the accommodation and food services sector in this country has shrunk by almost a quarter. IT, arts and culture lost 13% of all its jobs. Education, 9%. Wholesale and retail trade lost 7%. The only place that continues to add some jobs, other than, say, grocery stores and essential services work, would be agriculture. Nearly 7,000 jobs there created as, obviously, the reliance on a domestic food chain becomes more and more important. I'll bring in my colleagues again and turn to you, Vashi, about, I guess, the ways in which the government has tried to shore up support for the economy and how this might be different, given that there are particular areas, of course, that are basically not functioning anymore.
Yeah, I think we've seen the unveiling and the sort of rolling out of two giant financial aid packages, right? The first being directed at individuals who have to stay home because of COVID-19, who can't work and who have lost most, if not all, of their income. They're getting right now $2,000. And as you reminded our viewers yesterday, they should be reapplying for the second month to which they might need that money. That was the first step. The second step was aimed at businesses, and it involves wage subsidies, 75% 100% wage subsidy, as well as this loan, this Canadian Emergency Business Account, basically a $40,000 interest-free loan. A quarter of it can be forgiven. They expanded the parameters yesterday to who can qualify for that loan. I think they've had 220,000 applications approved so far, $8.8 billion worth of credit. So the need is clear and it's evident. However, as you've been discussing with Carolyn and with your last guest, there are certain sectors, and the Prime Minister always, I've noticed, names them in tandem. I think Salima pointed that out as well. Airlines, tourism, and the oil patch. Those are clearly what the government has indicated, and I think what we can all sort of discern from what we see in front of us as sectors, industries that are particularly hard hit. Even though everyone is hard hit, they're sort of suffering from double or triple whammies. And so, what we are looking towards here from the Prime Minister is, beyond an acknowledgement that that is the case, some specifics about how the government plans to address the more acute needs in those industries. And obviously, we're paying close attention to the oil patch because it is set against the backdrop of a very different political discussion. And I think sort of tensions that existed prior to all of this between Alberta and the federal government. And I think, that factors into all of this to a certain degree. We know about this discussion that's apparently happening at Cabinet where there's pushback to the idea of subsidizing the oil patch to any degree. So how that factors into what results today and what the Prime Minister is able to announce, I think is something to keep our eye on. But as I said, I think what we really need to focus on is, if those are the industries that are most acutely feeling the pain right now, what is the remedy the government proposes here today?
Yeah, and there is, and I think Salima mentioned this too, regional economic development. So there are some agencies, government agencies, of course, like ACOA for the Atlantic provinces, where federal money can be sort of distributed in a very quick way. So if there are particularly hard-hit areas, it is probably easier and faster for those agencies to be able to get it to people that need it, rather than the federal government doing it centrally from Ottawa. So we would expect some of that to be addressed here today as well. I'll turn to Salima Shivji just first as we wait. The Prime Minister is running a couple minutes late. I might cut you off, but hopefully not. There are ongoing conversations around the Canada-U.S. border. We know that suspension, the prevention to travel across the border except for essential workers, is set to expire next week.
That's right, and there are discussions as to whether that would be extended or not. We are understanding that those discussions are still ongoing, obviously this situation, we're still in the midst of it in terms of this crisis and the health effects of this. And so the limited movement, of course, limited to only essential supplies, essential businesses along the Canada and U.S. border, set to, there was always a deadline for it, as most of these things. And of course, we're hearing that there are talks to extend that as we're still going through this and as we're still seeing the effects and cases rising, most particularly in the United States as well, and some of the hardest hit states down there, New York being one of them. So we're hearing that is still an ongoing discussion, and they're working on that with officials down in the United States.
And there had been some concern after the president said earlier this week that Canada-U.S. border would be one of the fastest to reopen, and some interpretation that maybe that meant that it was about to reopen. That is not the case from what we hear from the Deputy Prime Minister, who is working on this file, obviously, that there will likely be an extension, but they haven't actually reached that deal yet. So, but that would be important, you're right, because the containment of the virus and seeing how Canada is doing at a time like this versus the United States, probably the last thing that anyone would want is to sort of open borders and start to see travel move again. All right, we are waiting for the Prime Minister, as we do at this time of day. He is running a couple minutes late. That is Rideau Cottage you are looking at live. I'm sure you're very familiar with it now. A couple other issues to keep your eye on today, and we heard earlier from Conservative leader Andrew Scheer, and that is the return of Parliament. It too was on a deadline. All parties had agreed that it would be suspended until Monday, unless they could reach another agreement to continue that suspension. As of now, there is no deal on that either. And Andrew Scheer has been pushing very hard to see in-person sittings. He is asking for 4 times a week. It doesn't sound like that is acceptable to the government. And it doesn't even sound like other parties are interested in that, coming in and having MPs here in a reduced capacity for that many days a week. But it is something that Conservatives continue to push, And for now, there is no deal. And if they don't get a deal by Monday, which I imagine they will, we would be in a place where the House of Commons would have to resume sitting in full, which obviously would fly in the face of public health directives. So another issue to keep your eye on. And I will bring in Vashi because there's another 2-minute warning, and I don't think I'm going to be able to vamp for another 2 minutes on my own. Maybe we'll just pick up on that issue of that the Conservatives are pushing very hard for increased accountability and increased questions to the government, which I totally get, but I'm not sure that we are. It doesn't sound like we're anywhere near close on a deal in terms of everyone agreeing that 1 or 2 times or 3 times a week will actually happen.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting Ottawa scenario here in the midst of all of this that is understandable, I think, from both points of view. The nexus of the disagreement seems to be how much in-person parliament should we or should politicians be engaging in? As you mentioned, Rosie, the Conservatives want sittings, in-person sittings, obviously with a reduced number of MPs, 4 times a week. That was their initial ask. The negotiations have been ongoing. My understanding was late yesterday that it looked like there might be at least some movement towards an agreement for a reduced number of sittings, maybe once a week, and it would end up being a few hours and very much an accountability session. So maybe not like question period, but something like what we've come to know as Committee of the Whole. Basically, the opposition getting a chance to ask questions of the government about the policies that they have rolled out and that they plan to roll out. The corresponding question is, well, can they do that virtually? Will they be able to do that virtually? The government, the Speaker's office in particular, is working on some sort of plan to make that happen. The issue is that for the opposition, they would like to continue some in person. They say that the virtual thing can be a companion piece, but if it's not ready yet, then there has to be something happening in person. The government has put forward the idea that that virtual idea might work going forward, but to have those in-session, sittings every single day, to be in person every single day, doesn't really adhere to physical distancing rules from from where they sit, or it doesn't really speak, I guess, to the sentiment behind physical distancing and the message that they've put forth.
All right, here's the Prime Minister. Vashi, thank you for that. The Prime Minister of Canada.
This morning, I want to begin by talking about the request for assistance we receive from Quebec on Wednesday and give you the most recent news about medical equipment supplies. The Minister of Public Health has been working with Quebec and the Minister of National Defence, and I can now confirm that approximately 125 members of the Canadian Armed Forces with healthcare training will be providing support to workers in long-term care facilities. We continue to work with the Government of Quebec to find other ways to support them, including with the Red Cross and specialized volunteers registered with Health Canada. As regards the supplies of medical equipment, Bell Canada has donated 1.5 million N95 masks, and we are working as quickly as possible to get them to our frontline workers. That can be added to the millions of surgical masks that we sent out to the provinces and territories this week.
Over the past few weeks, the pandemic has created anxiety and uncertainty for all Canadians, but some are going through an especially tough time. COVID-19 has brought many industries to a halt, and workers across the country are struggling as a result. From the start, our goal as a government has been clear: to help all Canadians get through these challenging times. As I've said many times before, we're here to support you, to lend you a helping hand when you need it most. Across the country, Canadians are standing shoulder to shoulder, and we're all in this together. Today, our government is announcing more help for workers in Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, and Newfoundland and Labrador. We're also announcing more help for small businesses and more help for those who work in the arts, culture, and sports sectors. I'll start with the energy sector. Right now, workers and families are struggling because of things beyond their control. Both the devastating effects of the pandemic and the price war driven by foreign interests are a challenge. As a result, companies have had to slow down or pause their operations, leaving too many people out of work. To help these workers, our government will invest $1.7 billion to clean up orphan and inactive wells in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC. These wells, which are no longer in use, can be detrimental not only to our environment, but to people's health. Think of the farmer who can't grow anything on his land because of an abandoned well a few steps away from his home. Think of the small town or Indigenous community struggling with this issue that has been festering for years or even decades. Cleaning them up will bring people back to work and help many landowners who've had these wells on their property for years but haven't been able to get them taken care of and the land restored. Our goal is to create immediate jobs in these provinces while helping companies avoid bankruptcy and supporting our environmental targets. In Alberta alone, these investments will maintain 5,200 jobs. We've listened to the concerns of landowners, municipalities, and Indigenous communities who want to make sure that the polluter pay principle is strengthened and that their voices are heard. I want to thank the Government of Alberta for working with us and listening to their concerns. Our government will also establish a $750 million emission reduction fund with a focus on methane to create and maintain jobs through pollution reduction efforts. This includes $75 million to help the offshore industry cut emissions in Newfoundland and Labrador. This fund will primarily provide repayable contributions to firms to make them more competitive, reduce waste and pollution, and most importantly, protect jobs. Right now, many energy firms are experiencing a cash crunch, so they don't have the funds to invest in technologies to reduce emissions or fix methane leaks. Today's announcement will allow for this kind of work to be done and create jobs people need during this difficult time. Through the wells and methane initiatives, we estimate that we will maintain roughly 10,000 jobs across the country. Just because we're in a health crisis doesn't mean we can neglect the environmental crisis. We're also working with BDC and EDC to expand credit support for at-risk medium-sized energy companies so they can maintain operations and keep their employees. Our
government will be investing $1.7 billion to clean up orphan and abandoned wells in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia. The goal is to create jobs for workers in the energy sector, avoid companies going bankrupt, and support our environmental targets. These wells, which are no longer used to produce oil, may present a risk not only for our environment, but also for our health. By cleaning them up, we will create jobs for workers. We will also help people who have these abandoned wells on their land and cannot get rid of them. We are predicting that these funds will maintain almost 5,200 jobs in Alberta alone. We developed this policy with the Government of Alberta and municipal partners, and I want to thank them for their contributions. Our government will also be setting up a $750 million fund to reduce emissions that will focus on pollution caused by methane in order to create and maintain jobs. Of that sum, $75 million will be allocated to oil and gas companies who work offshore Newfoundland and Labrador to reduce their emissions. This fund will provide for repayable contributions to companies in order to protect jobs, increase their competitiveness, and reduce pollution. Right now, energy sector companies have cash flow problems, which means that they don't have the necessary money to invest in technologies that help to reduce emissions or repair methane leaks. Today's announcement will allow these companies to carry out that work while at the same time creating jobs for workers during this difficult time. This public health crisis must not prevent us from taking action to fight the climate crisis. And with this initiative to clean up the wells and the fund to reduce emissions, we believe that 10,000 jobs will be maintained. At the same time, we are working with BDC and EDC to strengthen credit support for medium-sized energy companies that are particularly at risk. Once again, the goal is to allow these companies to continue their activity in order to keep their employees.
Now, I want to turn to what we're going to do next for small businesses and the people they employ. Over the past few weeks, we've taken a number of steps to support these employers and mostly their employees. We introduced the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy to help keep people on the payroll. We launched and expanded the Canada Emergency Business Account for those businesses struggling with cash flow. But Ministers Joly, Ng, Baines, and others have heard that some businesses are still falling through the cracks. To fix that, our government will provide $962 million to regional development agencies and the Community Futures Network. This funding will help ensure that more businesses, especially smaller employees based in more rural parts of the country, or those who don't have a relationship with a traditional financial institution, are getting the support that they need. We're also going to give $270 million to Futurepreneur and the Industrial Research Assistance Program to support innovators and other early-stage development firms that don't qualify for the wage subsidy but still need help.
Now, for small businesses, today we are announcing two further investments. First, our government will provide $962 million to regional development agencies and to the Community Futures Network. This is money that will make it possible to provide help to small businesses that don't qualify for the emergency wage subsidy or to receive a loan through the emergency account. Our government will also allocate $270 million to Futurepreneur and to the Industrial Research Assistance Program to support innovators and other startups that are not eligible for the wage subsidy. We also have news for people working in the arts, culture and sports sectors. These are industries which, somewhat like the small businesses I just described, are not able to receive the assistance already announced because their income structures are not the same or they don't operate the same way. From the beginning of this crisis, artists have been providing us with comfort, laughter, and happiness. Now our athletes continue to inspire us, encourage us, and make us proud. People who work in the arts, culture, and sports sectors share their passion with us and allow us to dream. And these days, when we're all at home and isolated, they make us feel a little bit less alone. These are only some of the reasons why we have to be there for them, as they are there for us. Therefore, our government will provide $500 million to Heritage Canada to support our artists, creators, and the rising stars of our sporting associations. Through this funding, people will be able to receive wage support, and organizations will have access to funding if they are experiencing liquidity problems.
We'll give $500 million to Heritage Canada to support those who work in the arts, culture, and sports sectors. Like the small businesses I was talking about, people and businesses in these sectors do not have access to some of the help we've announced because of how the companies operate or how revenues are generated. With this investment, people will be able to receive wage support, and organizations that are struggling with cash flow will be able to access financing. At the same time, we continue to support those who've lost their jobs with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So far, over 7.5 million payments have been made. That's money sent directly to those who need it most. I want to again thank our amazing public servants who are processing these claims at record speeds. Moving forward, we will be releasing the latest figures on the CERB through the government's open data portal 3 times a week, so academics, researchers, and Canadians can keep track of the work being done. We will continue to provide and open up data so that we can get the best advice from experts and continue to help Canadians. I want to end this morning by reminding everyone that today is the 38th anniversary of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which underpins who we are as a country and who we strive to be as a people. It protects the right of each and every one of us to be who we are, to worship how we want, to love whom we love. At the heart of the Charter is the notion of choice, that we can choose the kind of life we want for ourselves. As our country confronts this pandemic, I'm especially grateful that Canadians have chosen to protect each other and care for one another. To everyone who has stayed home and followed public health recommendations, thank you. Making that choice together today will ensure that we remain who we are as Canadians for generations to come. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Je suis maintenant content de prendre les questions.
I'm now ready to take your questions.
Monsieur le Premier ministre, on va commencer la période de questions par le téléphone. Opérateur, c'est à vous.
Merci. Thank you. The first question, Dylan Robertson, Winnipeg Free Press, line open.
Prime Minister, you've expressed a preference for virtual parliament. Many regions of Canada have terrible internet connections, and they tend to be the ones that feel the most ignored by Ottawa. Are you comfortable with having virtual sittings if MPs can't participate in real time from their homes?
Obviously, the point of virtual sittings would be to ensure that Canadians who are not within driving distance of Ottawa continue to have their views represented and their concerns heard. That is a technological challenge that we will work very, very hard on to ensure that as we move forward on virtual Parliament solutions, as the Speaker and the House of Commons work on that, that we make sure that every voice can be heard of the 338 Canadians. At the same time, we have proposed to the opposition parties that Parliament could come back every single week to discuss legislation and to ensure that there is accountability. We need to make sure that our democracy continues to function, and this is something that we are very serious about. We recognize right now, on the books, there is a rule that says that 338 MPs need to get on flights Friday or Sunday evening to come back to Ottawa on Monday morning as Parliament is supposed to resume. That is obviously not a good idea. We are not in normal circumstances, so we're negotiating with all opposition parties to try and make sure we can find a way to keep the important work of our democracy going while at the same time respecting public health advice.
First of all, in terms of a virtual parliament, I think it will be important to ensure that members of parliament from every corner of this country can share their preoccupations and those of their constituents. And that's why we're working with the House of Commons to ensure that we have the technology to do that. At the same time, we know that it's important for our democracy to continue to work, and therefore we have proposed that Parliament resume its work every week to pass legislation and ensure that there is accountability and that questions can be asked of the government. We do hope that the opposition parties will agree to that proposal, because otherwise Parliament is supposed to sit with 338 members of Parliament starting on Monday morning, and I think we all realize that that would not be a good idea.
And Prime Minister, the Manitoba Premier has asked for an emergency credit agency to access better interest rates. Governor Polo says that your government did not ask the Bank of Canada to help with the provincial debt market. He said no one has asked us to do anything on the provincial front. The Premier has also asked to put public servants on EI. Today's job announcement doesn't hit the provincial debt markets. So my question is, when will the provinces learn what you're doing for their debts? And what is already off the table?
I had an excellent conversation last night with the premiers of all the provinces and territories. This issue was brought up, and I assured them that Finance Canada is looking at it. We recognize that different provinces carry different debt loads and different challenges on access to credit. The Bank of Canada has taken significant measures that have had a positive impact on provincial coffers. At the same time, we will continue to make sure that provinces across the country are able to give the support they need to give to their citizens.
Thank you. Next question, moderator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Althea Raj, Huffington Post. Line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. You've announced a number of measures today and also earlier this week changes to help those with some income apply for the CRB. You've lowered the threshold for some business owners to apply for interest-free loans. But still, a number of people I've spoken with this week are not impacted by any of these changes. What should people in these positions, people who are left out and who have a hard time making ends meet, do? Should they apply for the CRB or should they wait for your government to come up with another fix?
From the very beginning, we knew we had to help as many people as we possibly could who needed the help as quickly as possible. That's why we moved forward with two very big, very strong programs, both the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that has sent out over 7.5 million payments already, and the wage subsidy, which will kick in a few weeks, which is allowing employers to rehire their employees so that when the economy bounces back, people will still have those links to their jobs while they are supported in this time of difficulty. But from the beginning, we recognized that moving quickly and broadly would leave gaps. And that's why over the past weeks, we have been announcing almost every single day new measures that tweak the proposals we've made, that expand other proposals, that create new initiatives to try and make sure we're getting help to everyone who needs them. The announcements we've made today around help for the arts and cultural sectors, for sporting organizations, for small businesses like startups, for small businesses in rural areas, for the range of workers in the energy sector who are facing layers of calamity right now, are the kinds of things that we're making sure that everyone is getting the help we need. We are continuing to listen to Canadians who are expressing that they are not getting the help they need, and we are constantly looking for ways to help them.
Follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you. So are you basically saying wait until the government comes up with another fix? Because as you know, on Saturday, MPs voted to support a motion that basically said that if you need help, the government is going to ensure that if you applied for CERB and you weren't supposed to be eligible, that you would be unjustly penalized. So is the government saying that the worst thing that will happen to you if you apply for CERB but don't actually qualify, that you will have to pay the money back in full next year? Is that the worst thing that will happen to people who apply for CERB because they feel they need it?
We expect people to apply for the programs for which they qualify, and we are therefore working to make sure we're expanding the qualifications so that people who need the help will get them. We will continue to announce measures that will include more and more people, help more and more people as we move forward, because for all the millions of people and companies and businesses and employers that we're helping across this country, we know there is more to do, and that's what we're continually announcing almost every day, new measures to fix support for people in particular situations.
We recognize that the programs that we created very quickly to help as many people as possible are not enough. Because some people have special circumstances. So for a number of weeks now, almost on a daily basis, we have been announcing changes or extensions of the programs to allow people to receive more help based on the programs we put in place.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Marie Vastel, Le Devoir. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to come back to your aid plan that you have just unveiled. A lot of people were expecting you to do more. Some people were suggesting that there needed to be an equity contribution from the government. Are you prepared to do that? And if not, why not? Why did you not choose that avenue? Our emphasis right from the outset was to help Canadians in difficulty, to help families that are suffering, to help people who need help. And that's why the wage subsidy and the Canada Emergency Response Benefit are there to assist millions of Canadians in industries right across the country. And we clearly saw that the oil industry has special issues because of what is happening on international markets with the oil price decline, and also because of COVID-19. So all of these issues mean that we have to do a bit more, and that's exactly what we're doing now. We will continue to look at other possibilities if there's a need, but we primarily want to ensure that we're helping Canadian families and Canadian workers who need help during these difficult times.
We took as an approach from the very beginning that we need to help Canadians. We need to help workers and families who are hit by this COVID-19 slowdown and shutdown. That's why we move forward with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that has helped millions upon millions of Canadians, and the wage subsidy, which has allowed companies to rehire workers and will ensure that families across the country get much more support. And that is across all industries, across the country. However, we recognize that certain industries are facing even more difficult times. The oil and gas sector, because of the global price war, because of the lower demand related to COVID, and because of the measures brought in to counter COVID itself, those families are particularly hard hit. And that's where this initiative, which will create or preserve 5,200 jobs in Alberta, and the other initiatives, which will lead to perhaps 10,000 jobs across the energy sector, are the kinds of things that we can do right now. Of course, we will continue to work with partners and concerned sectors across the country as we move forward to see if there's a need to do more.
En suivi, Marie?
Yes. Some people were concerned that your assisted would be influenced by some members of your cabinet, the views of some members of their cabinet. Today you're providing support to clean up orphan walls and to reduce emissions. So what do you say to those people who will be disappointed by the extent of the assistance that's available, and also other people who said that you may have been tainted by the views of other members of your cabinet? I can tell you that personal convictions of cabinet members have always been that we need to help Canadians who need help and to fight the COVID-19 crisis. It's to ensure that we can get through this and we continue to be an extraordinary country in the years to come. That is our priority, and that is why the help that we've been giving workers with two main measures, the emergency response benefit and the wage subsidy, are available to everyone. But at the same time, we're doing other things that the government of Alberta has been asking us to do for some time, which is to clean up orphan wells so that the companies that now are reducing or are required to reduce their emissions are able to do that, particularly when it comes to methane. So that is the choice we have been making to help Canadians, and we hope that all Canadians will have a better employment as a result.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. À vous.
Merci. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. With respect to the deployment of Canadian Armed Forces members, can you tell us where those military members are coming from? And why such a limited number of reinforcements for Quebec? because, as we know, these facilities are in a dire situation. Well, we have been working with Quebec, and we were speaking to Quebec yesterday to see exactly how we could support them. We're talking about 125 military members who will be providing significant support to these institutions in Quebec, but we also know we can do more with the Red Cross and the Bank of Volunteers that we have. Quebec also has a Bank of Volunteers it can access. So we will continue to seek ways to provide that help as best we can, and we always will want to do more. But the situation with the CAF members is that we are always limited in our medical resources within any organization, including in the armed forces. Do you have a follow-up? Yes. Just to get a clarification, I realize that medical employees are limited in number, but there is information circulating, Mr. Trudeau, that an agreement has been reached with the U.S. on the closure of the border. Could you comment on that? Well, as I've said before, we are in constant conversations with the United States, which is our ally and our friend, to ensure that we can both protect our citizens. And my priority will always be to protect Canadians, and we continue to work with the Americans to ensure that the borders remain secure. As I've often said, I do not expect those borders to be reopened in a short period of time. We will continue to listen to science and to closely monitor the evolution of this virus in Canada and around the world before we make any decision on that. But I can tell you that our discussions with the Americans continue, and they're very positive.
As I've said many times, conversations are constant and ongoing with the American administration on issues of mutual concern, including the border. As I've said, we do not feel that reopening the border anytime soon is likely. My responsibility is to ensure the protection and safety of Canadians. That is what we will continue to do, and the conversations with the Americans have been extremely aligned and extremely productive.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, for weeks now, you have been promising relief and aid for the energy sector. What you've announced today is going to help a comparatively small number of workers. It isn't going to do anything for the sector overall to help deal with devastating impact of this virus and the downturn in the world oil markets. My question is this it? Is this the package you were promising? And if so, what do you say to people in Western Canada, particularly, who was expecting more substantial relief?
The first things we did was move forward with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that's putting money in the pockets of more than 7 million Canadians, including many people in the oil and gas sector who've lost their paychecks because of this COVID-19 crisis. On top of that, the wage subsidy allows Canadian workers to continue to receive their salaries, to continue to stay connected to their work in the oil and gas sector, which are significant helps for a major industry across this country. On top of that, we've been working with the government of Alberta and with industry to look at other things that can be necessary. We heard very clearly that the methane regulations that we are bringing in will be a challenge for industries to meet, and industry and others asked that we therefore back off on the methane regulations. We decided instead to lend them money to help them keep people working to upgrade and update their measures so we can continue to fight climate change and reduce emissions while keeping people at work. We've also heard very clearly, and not just from industry, but from municipalities, particularly rural municipalities, landowners across Alberta, that the issue of persistent orphan or inactive wells is a real challenge. And this is an opportunity for us to make sure that Albertans are getting to work in cleaning up their province, at the same time as we've gotten commitments by the government of Alberta to strengthen the regulations so we see fewer orphan and inactive wells in the future. We've also made credit available for medium-sized oil and gas companies who are facing particular challenges in terms of liquidity right now. We will continue to look at ways we can support important industries in this country, including the oil and gas sector. We look forward to doing that while at the same time keeping our focus squarely on families and workers who need our help.
Prime Minister Julie Van Dusen, CBC News. You spoke to the premiers last night, so I'm hoping you can update us on this. Blaine Higgs, as an example, has said he's hoping to get his economy going by the summer. John Horgan this morning on CBC said that he and his Washington state counterpart could decide when the border opens. So I'm wondering, who decides all this? Is it you? Is it them? And if it is you, will there be national standards to guide them?
We talked last night about how important it is to be coordinated and agreed on the principles and the approaches that we take, while at the same time recognizing that the situation in PEI is very different from the situation in Ontario, very different from the situation in BC. There will be regional approaches, as there have been all along, to the next steps, but we all agreed that we need to continue to remain very, very vigilant as we carefully look at reopening the economy, about relaunching certain sectors in the future. We will continue our coordination around the principles and the steps that need to be taken. But of course, this is Canada, which means that there are very different needs and very different approaches that will be in place across the country. What we will be working on to coordinate and collaborate on is ensuring that the messages that get out and that the lens that we take and the data that we collect and the way we do this is aligned and coordinated so that we can maximize our chances of getting through this without having to fall back into self-isolation the way we have been these past few weeks.
One of the principles we agreed on with the premiers is the importance of coordinating and working together to ensure that any steps that we take with respect to reopening the economy or relaxing the current rules with respect to self-isolation and physical distancing are done in proper coordination. Now, obviously, certain provinces and regions will have their own reality, and we respect that, of course. But if we can ensure that there is proper coordination so that Canadians understand that the same principles are being applied across the board, that data is being collected in the same way, and that we're analyzing the reality vigilantly and consistently and in a similar manner, then that will maximize our chance of getting through this crisis without finding ourselves in more self-isolation and economic slowdown.
Prime Minister, Canada's largest oil and gas lobby group says the federal government should consider suspending dozens of environmental regulations, laws, and policies due to the economic and health crisis triggered by COVID-19. Critics call it a crass attempt to exploit the pandemic. How do you respond to the letter, and are some of the 30 requests still being considered by the government?
Just because we are in one crisis right now doesn't mean we can forget about the other crisis, the climate crisis that we are also facing as a world, as a country. But we recognize that, for example, moving ahead with the methane regulations is something very difficult for companies right now in the oil and gas sector who are strained because of the multiple challenges they're facing both on the global stage and on the lower demand. That's why we're making investments in supporting those companies directly so that they can meet those methane reduction targets with funds that we're giving them so that we can stay on track to protect future generations and to reduce emissions from our industry. This is something that Canadians understand, that we need to continue to move forward, but we need to help people in different ways as we move forward. That will be the lens that we take.
And on a separate matter, China has revised its numbers on the Wuhan deaths, increasing them by 50%. Do you think this is a statistical verification, as China claims, or proof they covered it up?
I think we all need to be very attentive to how data flows around the world and be very thoughtful about how we process different information and how we apply the lessons learned from elsewhere around the world to what we do. We will continue to work with partners and allies and international institutions and organizations as we figure out how to get through today and tomorrow. But there will be many questions to ask once we are through this on how various countries behaved and what sort of principles we need to learn from and conclusions we need to draw as we move forward. Okay. Je pense que nous avons besoin.
I think we need to look very carefully at the numbers being shared by countries around the world, and certainly there will be certain conclusions to draw from them regarding the behavior of some of these countries. But for the time being, we must work together, we must cooperate and do everything we can to learn from each other and better protect our own citizens.
Globe and Mail, Prime Minister, other world leaders have raised serious questions about China's handling of this pandemic and whether it holds responsibility for not containing it within its borders. It's not just the White House, it's also leaders in France and the United Kingdom. Here at home, your government has taken the opposite approach, with one former Canadian ambassador calling Ottawa's approach almost humiliating. In your answer just now, you didn't even mention China by name. So why is your government so reluctant to acknowledge China's possible faults in this pandemic?
My job right now is to make sure that Canadians get the best support, the best protection, and are able to get through this as best we possibly can. That means getting the equipment that we need. That means ensuring that the cooperation and the collaboration on the international stage is done properly. That means focusing right now on today and tomorrow and how we're going to keep Canadians safe. There will be plenty of time to point fingers, to ask questions, to draw conclusions, and to ensure that there are consequences for things that different countries may have done during this pandemic. Right now, my job is to look out for Canadians. Okay. My responsibility as Prime Minister
is to ensure the health and safety of all Canadians. And that's exactly what I'm doing now, and that's what I intend to continue to do. We will continue to work with different countries and international institutions to ensure that we're doing everything that's necessary to get through this. And after that, there's no doubt that there will be questions raised and further reflection. There may even be consequences for some countries, depending on how they behaved during this global crisis. But for the time being, I have to remain focused on what is important for Canadians.
So are you suggesting, I guess, that, China might withhold PPE or something? Is that why you're not mentioning China, as you still continue to do? And on Julie's question about the way out of this, what level of testing do we need to see across Canada in order to start reopening the economy?
We've looked at the need for many more tests. So we see that testing has been a key part of controlling the spread, not just knowing who has developed COVID and can pass it on, but actually being able to control the spread through contact tracing, through isolation and quarantine measures. Testing is a key part of it. We need to continue to ramp up our testing capacities. We need to do a better job of coordinating on testing methodology and approaches across the provinces so that we can have a better vision of what is exactly happening. But testing certainly needs to increase as we move forward. Fortunately, it is increasing as we move forward.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau, Philippe Vincent, Président Radio-Canada.
Radio-Canada. About the 125 medical personnel from the CAF, how many physicians, how many nurses are in that number? Are we taking people away from civilian hospitals to do that? And when exactly will they be able to go into these long-term care facilities? We will be sharing that information with you in the coming hours, but I can tell you that as early as this afternoon, there will be members of the armed forces that will be on the ground to assess the kind of approach that is needed and what their posture will be. And in the coming days, many of those 125 personnel will be arriving on the ground in Quebec. And with respect to the $500 million for artists, who will be getting it? Why isn't it the association receiving it? Well, I want to say that Minister Guilbeault and other ministers will be at a press conference very soon to answer those questions as to how we're going to be helping our artists. We know that this is a situation where many artists are in real difficulty, and we need our artists. We need them to continue to make us dream, particularly in dark times. That's why we're going to be there to help them. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, that is the Prime Minister of Canada speaking to Canadians on his daily update for in the government's fight against COVID-19. Another huge amount of money, really, to try and help different Canadians in different sectors in this country. And I'll bring in Vashi Kapelis and Salima Shivji just to sort of muddle through a little bit of what we heard there, because there was a lot of it. And we are waiting, of course, for the federal briefing as well. Let me just say this part, that Quebec did ask for additional help from the federal government, and that has now been negotiated. And the Prime Minister confirms that 125 Canadian Forces members are on their way to help at long-term care centres, presumably to do some of the additional work that doctors and nurses and aid workers can't do, and they could be there as early as this afternoon. So that is significant. But there is just an astounding amount of money flowing from federal coffers right now. And I'll just say this, we got some updated numbers on the CERB. $17 billion so far, $25 billion federal loan program, the $71 billion wage subsidy, and now today on top of this. Vashi, what parts stood out to you there as highly significant? Oil and gas probably you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think I will, if you don't mind, Rosie, zero in on oil and gas, because as we had been discussing prior to this, there is a heightened need for help in the sector, especially for workers, many of whom have been laid off thanks to the double whammy of COVID-19 and its sort of consequences, and then also a price war that emerged between Saudi Arabia and Russia. The announcement from the Prime Minister today, somewhat anticipated, geared towards cleaning up what are known as orphan wells in both Alberta and Saskatchewan, and I think BC as well. A $1.7 billion directed towards that the government says will help maintain 5,200 jobs in Alberta alone. They also announced $750 million for what they're calling an emission reduction fund, and they say that combining that, and some of that will go specifically towards Newfoundland and Labrador, but combining that with the wells announcement, that saves, or that maintains is the word that they used, about 10,000 jobs. On the orphan wells, just to explain, basically this is a big problem in Alberta and has actually been for decades. Usually an oil company will come, drill on someone's land. In Alberta, you have rights to your land, but not to the minerals and the resources underneath them. When that company, if that company goes broke, what ended up happening is many of those wells then sit there unclaimed. They're not remediated. They're not cleaned up. And thousands of such wells exist in Alberta right now. The provincial government has put some money towards it. Industry has put a little bit of money towards it. But this by far is the biggest chunk of change that has been directed towards that. I would highlight just one final thing, and that is on the second part of what was being asked for by the province of Alberta, specifically more liquidity for oil producers. The Prime Minister, in broad strokes, said that they are going to be working with the BDC, the development banks, and the EDC to offer more credit to small and medium-sized oil companies. But he did not offer any specifics about how much money they would be using and if it would be, in fact, to backstop those loans. And I think the hint I could take from that was not for big oil companies. So that addresses some of the criticism that the government is bound to receive, that they are in a way subsidizing industry. Obviously, with environmental concerns, that is sort of a vulnerability for them. I think that is aimed at addressing that possible criticism. I just don't know what that backstop means, what that liquidity looks like, and there were no details offered today yet.
And I would just say that both of those measures I found interesting, and we're going to have to go to the press conference, but both of those measures I found interesting because while they were helping the oil and gas industry, they also have environmental components to try and move the government's own agenda forward on those environmental components. And Salima, I'll have you talk to that if this press conference wraps up, because it may never. Thank you both, and let me go now to the press conference with the federal cabinet ministers and public health officials. This is the Deputy Prime Minister.
For economic development and official languages, who is with us?
Science and Industry, Navdeep Bains, who is joining us remotely as well. Also with us is the Deputy Chief Public Health Officer, le Dr. Howard New. Il est ici et est prêt à répondre à vos questions.
Dr. Howard New is with us and ready to answer your questions.
Dr. Tam, please.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. I'll begin with our usual update on the number of COVID-19 cases in Canada. There are now 31,407 cases, including 1,250 deaths. For the lab testing, we've completed tests for over 503,000 people, with 6% confirmed positive. With the recent slowdown in epidemic growth, case counts are not climbing as rapidly as they had been. However, due to the prolonged clinical course of the disease, deaths have continued to climb as COVID-19 takes its devastating toll. It creates a bit of a paradox, where early in an epidemic, we see a rapid growth of new infections, but not so with deaths. Then as the epidemic begins to slow, the deaths accumulate at a faster pace. This is one of the reasons that earlier predicted deaths can be underestimated. But there are other reasons, such as when COVID-19 epidemic activity is introduced into settings where there are many older and more vulnerable people. I cannot stress enough how important it is to protect these vulnerable settings and people. This is a long-standing problem, but it is now incumbent upon us to solve it by addressing all weak points in our system. Pour mesurer nos progrès, il faut tenir compte.
To measure our progress, we must take into account the evolution of COVID-19 in Canada. The nature and intensity of spread depends on where you are in the country. Although our 4 largest provinces continue to report the bulk of cases in Canada, the highest case numbers have been coming out of Quebec and Ontario recently. At this important juncture, intense public health efforts are needed to stamp out existing outbreaks, prevent new outbreaks, and trace and manage chains of transmission in the community. To get this done, without slipping backwards, all Canadians need to continue to stay home and practice physical distancing.
COVID-19 outbreak in Canada to be aware of as we measure our progress is a different character and intensity of spread depending on where you are in the country. Although our 4 largest provinces continue to report the bulk of cases in Canada, the highest case numbers have been coming out of Quebec and Ontario recently. At this important juncture, intense public health efforts are needed to stamp out existing outbreaks, prevent new outbreaks, and trace and manage chains of transmission in the community. To get this done without slipping backwards, all Canadians need to continue to stay at home and practice physical distancing. All ears are perked for news of when and how we might get into an easing of these strict public health measures. Some areas will experience the epidemic slowdown earlier than others, but no matter where we are in the country, we've got to remember that Canadians are highly susceptible to the virus. Unless we all remain diligent in maintaining our new habits of physical distancing and good hygiene, new outbreaks can be sparked anywhere at any time. So remember, this is not a sprint, it is a marathon, and there will only be unpleasant surprises if we quit early. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Tam. And now we will hear from our Minister of Finance, Bill Morneau. Bill, please.
Well, thank you very much, Christia. It's good to be here with you, even remotely today. I think, as you know, and as Canadians know, we've been very focused on supporting people through the course of all the initiatives we've taken on an economic front, and today is particularly important in that regard. You've seen us put forward ways to support people with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit and the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. We know that some organizations have not been able to fully get access to those programs, including the business account for small businesses. So today we're announcing significant funding to help those small businesses in rural communities in particular that might not get access to the Canada Emergency Business Account or might not be eligible to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. We also know that among the places hardest hit in our country are the cultural sector, the arts and the culture and the sports sector. Les scènes étant vides.
Okay, and that is CBC, that is our daily briefing here on CBC. If you want to continue watching, you can go to CBC.ca or continue watching us on CBC News Network. We will be back here most likely tomorrow. I'm Rosemary Barton. Thanks for watching. I'm Rosemary Barton. You are watching CBC News Network or CBC.ca streaming around the world. Let's take you back to Ottawa, where federal ministers and public health officials are speaking. This is Finance Minister Bill Morneau.
That's funding that will go through Heritage Canada that I know my colleague Stephen Guilbeault will be talking about. And then finally, we know that there are many startup companies, companies that are just getting going that might not be able to have access to the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy or the Emergency Business Account. So we're putting money in that regard as well towards those firms. And I know my colleague Navdeep Bains will be talking about that. We also recognize that there's a real importance to supporting jobs in parts of our country that have been particularly hard hit, in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador. So I'm very pleased to talk about some initiatives today that will support people in those regions, in particular in the energy sector. We've got, importantly, a program where we're going to provide significant support in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and in British Columbia for the remediation of orphan oil wells, and abandoned oil wells. So we'll be putting forth funding directly to the Oil Wells Association in Alberta, and together with the government in Alberta and Saskatchewan and British Columbia, supporting abandoned wells so that we can create employment and also deal with an environmental problem. We're also moving forward on providing $750 million in loans to companies Alberta and Saskatchewan and Newfoundland and Labrador to reduce their methane emissions. So it's going to create jobs and at the same time allow us to reduce our environmental situation. So we're trying to make sure that we're putting money somewhere that will have the biggest impact both today and over the long term. Finally, what we know is so important to, especially to firms in the energy sector, is they need access to credit. So we're very pleased today to talk about credit on a commercial basis for mid-sized firms in the energy sector to help them to bridge through a really difficult time and be able to support their business, but also to support their employees. So from that perspective, what we're announcing today is very much important for jobs, supporting people across the country that might not get access to some of the programs we've announced, and helping people in particular in the energy sector to have support so they can have jobs or create jobs that will be very helpful to places that are particularly hard hit. So with that, Christia, I'll say thank you and look forward to if there's any questions later.
Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Now we'll hear from our Minister of Natural Resources, Seamus O'Regan. Seamus, please. We can't hear Seamus. Seamus, we can't hear you. Have you turned on?
It's on.
Perfect. We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Every time. Every time. Thank you. So every day over the past 2 weeks, I have been listening to workers and business owners and industry leaders in the energy sector. And living here in Newfoundland and Labrador, I know firsthand how hard Canada's petroleum industry has been hit. Canada is the fourth largest producer of oil in the world. It is an industry that employs over 576,000 Canadians from right across the country, including 11,000 Indigenous workers. It is an industry made up of more more than 4,500 businesses, the vast majority of which are small and medium-sized. It's an industry facing not one, but two fundamental crises, the impacts of COVID-19 and a subsequent drop in global demand of 30 to 35%, and the impacts of a price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia that flooded the market with underpriced product. Many of the measures that we have already announced are helping energy companies and their workers, including the Canada Emergency Business Account and the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Internationally, we're working with the G20, the International Energy Agency, and our U.S. partners to bring price stability to the oil market. Today, as Bill pointed out, we are doing more. Our goal here is twofold. First, it addresses the short-term liquidity needs of these companies. This is what both industry and labor have told me is their most immediate priority. Firms will be able to stay afloat for workers to have jobs to come back to. Secondly, to support the energy sector's transition to net zero, we are providing funding in two areas: cleaning up orphaned and inactive wells and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Orphan and inactive well cleanup offers an opportunity to put our highly skilled people to work right away. In addition, Natural Resources Canada will provide $750 million to help companies invest in technologies that will help them reduce their methane emissions. And $75 million of this funding is particularly earmarked for capital investments and research geared towards emissions reductions in the offshore energy sector to make the Newfoundland and Labrador industry even more competitive internationally. And we will continue to work over the weeks ahead on other ways that we can maintain our workforce and make them more competitive internationally. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Back to you, Christia.
Okay, thank you, Seamus. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au ministre du Patrimoine canadien.
We'll now go to Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Canadian Heritage. COVID-19 and public health measures have had an impact on our daily lives. And I'd like to ask you, what are you doing during physical distancing? Watching the news, watching a movie, TV, reading a good book, looking at a virtual exhibit?
Not only our artists, but our favorite athletes who inspire us to get involved in sports. Le gouvernement du Canada est très conscient de
Minister Guilbeault speaking. The government is very proud to provide assistance to these sectors. We stand behind those who are using their passion and their works to liven our lives.
$100 million to establish a COVID-19 emergency support fund for cultural, heritage, and sports organizations. Le gouvernement du Canada débloquera $500 millions pour établir
Minister Guilbeault, the government will provide $500 million for organizations in culture, heritage, and sport.
This targeted measure will provide financial support that is consistent with the government's existing COVID-19 support measures for wage and fixed costs for organization. It will be administered by Canadian Heritage with the support of many of our partners, such as the Canada Council for the Arts. Nous allons travailler avec le secteur de la culture.
Minister Guilbeault will be working with the sector in order to fine-tune this financial aid. We are doing our utmost to respond to your concerns, your most pressing concerns, to ensure your survival, stability, and so that Canadians continue to have access to cultural content and sports activities which are of the best in the world.
Celebrate Canada Day differently this year. Canada Day will be hosted virtually. La population canadienne relève d'un des plus grands défis.
Minister Guilbeault, together in a virtual environment, we will celebrate our strength and resilience as well as our values at Canada Day. Our creators and athletes are providing us with a number of examples of inspiration and solidarity.
We are reminded each day how fortunate we are to have such talent here in Canada. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Stephen. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au ministre du Développement.
Mr. Freeland, thank you, Stephen. We'll now go to Minister Joly. Minister Joly, in recent weeks, I've had an opportunity to have several discussions with a number of heads of chambers of commerce across the country, from Gaspésie to Montreal, Quebec, Moncton, and Edmonton. What they've all said is that this crisis is hitting them hard. They've shared their concerns with me their reality, their anxiety, and we have heard the message. Our objective today, in conjunction with the Minister of Finance, is to protect our streets, our small communities. We are doubling the budgets of our economic development agencies across the country. So essentially, $1 billion in additional funding will go to these development agencies across the country, be it in the east, the middle of Canada, the west, or the north. What we've heard is that access to financial institutions is oftentimes more difficult. So our objective is this. We want to prevent entrepreneurs from falling through the cracks when they have a critical role to play in their communities. Through our development and community futures organizations, which do excellent work on the ground, we will be in a position to help companies to have access to various government measures to help them make it through the crisis. The development agencies in Canada work locally and bring the government into the communities and defend the economic reality there. It's also responsible for helping during crises, as it has in the past in Fort McMurray, for example, during the fires.
Recently, I had good discussions with business owners via different chambers of commerce, from Surrey to Charlottetown and, of course, Saskatoon and St. John's. And we know the crisis is hitting hard. We heard many of the business owners' anxieties and preoccupations, and we've heard them. Our main objective today is to make sure that we protect our main streets all across the country. This is why we're answering the call by nearly doubling the budget of our different regional development agencies across this country, from Atlantic Canada to Quebec, Ontario, the West, and Northern Canada, so Northern Territories. The idea is to provide to businesses, to support businesses that may be falling through the cracks and are playing vital roles within their communities. We're doing also another thing by making sure that we're increasing the budget of our community's futures organizations that are key to our local businesses. And the idea is to make sure that we support them while they're doing great work on the ground. So the mission of the agencies is to make sure that they're the eyes and ears of the federal government on the ground, and they're always there in times of crisis, maybe to deal with the Fort McMurray fires or the Lac Mégantic tragedy. So today, what we're saying to business owners across this country is we've got your back.
Okay, thank you very much, Melanie. And now we will hear from our Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Navdeep Bains. Nav, please.
Thank you very much, Christia. In every industry and sector, companies are stepping up to lend a hand wherever possible. Les entreprises de tous les secteurs et de toutes les industries.
Minister Bains, companies are coming and helping people as much as they can.
The other side of that coin, Canadian businesses and highly skilled innovators that we will help in this period of uncertainty. You know, during the normal course of things, one of the important roles of government is providing economic support to high potential, innovative firms in the early stages of development, especially in a country like Canada, where science and innovation are our strengths. Time and time again, these innovative small and medium-sized companies become key economic drivers for long-term growth in good quality jobs for all Canadians. We sometimes call them the future gazelles of Canada's economy, since they end up putting Canada leaps and bounds ahead of the competition. And our government is in a unique position of being able to protect these important companies and the highly skilled people they employ through the National Research Council's Industrial Research Assistance Program, called IRAP. These innovative companies contribute disproportionately more to the success of the Canadian economy. But right now, many are facing real challenges because of the economic downturn resulting from COVID-19. They're looking at supply chain disruptions, cash flow issues, a collapse in demand, and therefore an inability to maintain staff to perform research and development. And we've heard from the startup community that some of these early stage firms do not qualify for the wage subsidy or business liquidity measures we've announced. We've heard the call for help from this part of the Canadian business community, and today we're answering it by injecting $250 million into the Industrial Research Assistance Program. This is an investment to protect Canada's highly skilled innovators. This support will be targeted to companies identified as strategic to the Canadian economy, impacted by COVID-19, whether they are pre-revenue or not. Ce soutien sera offert de façon ciblée aux entreprises.
Minister Baines, this assistance will help strategic companies.
I encourage any technology or innovation-based business that is unable to access the current support measures to go on to the National Research Council's website today, and they will be able to sign up to be notified when the application opens early next week. With today's announcement, we expect to support over 1,000 Canadian innovative firms and maintain 10,000 Canadian jobs over the next 3 months. Funding will begin to be delivered within a matter of days. When we support early stage firms, we're not only protecting the next generation of Canadian entrepreneurs, but also the people they employ. And we make sure Canada's best technology and research stays in Canada. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Nav. And we're now ready to take your questions.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. So as usual, we'll start with 3 questions on the phone and turn to the room. 1 question, 1 follow-up, une question, un suivi. Opérateur.
Thank you. Merci. Our first question, notre première question is from Micheline Laflamme avec Radio-Canada. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour.
Journalist. Mr. Guilbeault, could you give us more details on the assistance you're going to be providing to the cultural and sports industries? Who will the money go to? How will it assist? Will it go to the sports associations, to the athletes more specifically? Answer. Thank you, Madame Laflamme. The funding will go to the organizations. Our sector is different in that it is made up of people who are independent workers. So they're not employees for whom the wage subsidy would have applied. So we're talking about not-for-profit organizations, sports organizations at the national level, sports centers, media organizations, editors, companies, TV companies, music groups. And the programs that we've already announced weren't tailored for them and didn't take into account the specific nature of the arts and culture and sporting sectors.
Micheline, en suivi.
Follow-up question. Minister Joly, can you tell us a little bit more about the announcement you've made? You've talked about municipalities in various towns and villages across the country. There are companies there. Are those companies not eligible for the programs that you've announced? And what type of assistance will you be offering? Answer. What we've offered through government measures recently are a safety net. And what we're doing now is ensuring that no one is falling through the cracks. So we're tightening it up. We know, for example, that the $40,000 loan and the wage subsidy have impacts for many companies. There are some that still don't have access to that funding. So the regional development agencies will be providing assistance. The development agency in Quebec, for example, it's called DEC, and these agencies provide assistance in smaller communities in Quebec, for example, and across the country. So they're on the ground. They will be helping to provide assistance to small local businesses in those areas. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Teresa Wright with the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Good morning. Dr. Tam, I'm wondering if you can tell us if there's any guidance for health workers and doctors on how aid like ventilators should be rationed if it comes to that, and if anybody is working on any such guidelines.
Yeah, so there's allocation of supplies. That's a different framework, and that is in collaboration with provinces and territories in terms of the supplies of ventilators that we have. Now, on the ground, physicians and other health workers have to make some very difficult decisions sometimes if there was not enough ventilators or ICU beds. So those guidance are have been put in place at the provincial and territorial level, and certainly that flows down to the hospital level, so that you have these, and they're drafted by a broad range of experts, including ethicists and clinical and ICU and other experts and health systems experts, so that those difficult decisions can be facilitated at the time that they're needed.
Follow-up?
Yes, and my follow-up question is for Minister Morneau. Many people on social assistance programs are surviving on less than people who are getting the CERB, and many marginalized Canadians just can't access it. So rather than continue to tweak it as you have been doing, why not just make the CERB universal?
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's important to acknowledge that there are certainly people who are experiencing real challenges. We understand that. What we've been trying to do through the course of this crisis period is to address the people who've lost their income, who've lost their ability to continue to lead the life they were leading it before the crisis as a result of COVID-19. So that's how we've directed our attention. The good news is it's impacting, the measures we put forward are really having a big impact. We've, as you know, seen literally millions, more than 5 million people come onto the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. We, as of yesterday, had more than 220,000 small firms that applied for the Canada Emergency Business Account. So the measures we're taking are having a very, very wide application. And as you see today, we are trying to make sure that for places where, in particular for businesses that employ people where they need additional support, we're coming forward to make sure that we provide that support.
Thank you, Minister. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Émilie Bergeron avec Agence QMI. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour. Je sais pas trop à qui adresser ma question.
The journalist, I'm not sure who to put my question to, but anyone can answer it. It deals with soldiers being sent in to help out in Quebec. In a Maclean's article, a doctor who served in the forces talked about some 2,500 soldiers with medical training who could be available, but that there is a problem with respect to a recognition for their qualifications in Quebec and Ontario. Is there some way to make an exception so that more than these particular soldiers can be used to provide assistance? Minister Freeland, answer. The decision to respond to Quebec's request that went to the Prime Minister is an important one. It's a decision that was made in close cooperation with Quebec, the Canadian Forces, the Minister of Public Safety, the Minister of Health, the Minister of Defense. We worked hard to identify the necessary people with the language skills, the training required to help in Quebec. We identified 125 people, and a decision was made in conjunction with Quebec, and these people will make a difference. With respect to providing additional assistance, we continue to hold ongoing discussions with Quebec. We are working with Quebec to support the province. I'd also like to add that the Prime Minister has stated we will be working with the Red Cross. It will also help in Quebec. Then there are the volunteers who have registered. So we'll also be working with that list of people to identify those who can help. Thank you. A follow-up question? And what about the volunteers? Can you give us an idea how many more people could be sent to Quebec from the Red Cross then, and from that list of volunteers? Answer, Minister Phelan. At this point, no. What I do want to underscore is that it is essential to work in close cooperation with the province. We are doing this work together, and I'd also like to assure Quebecers that we fully understand the urgency of the situation, and we are working very hard to find the resources to help Quebecers. Thank you, Minister.
Room starting with David Thornton, CBC.
The woes in the oil and gas sector isn't going away anytime soon, so some people are probably wondering, is there going to be any more help that's going to be on the way? And can you maybe walk us through the range of things that you're thinking of, Minister Morneau, Minister Regan?
I'm going to, just because with all the three people on screens, it requires a little bit of traffic cop activity. So I'm going to turn to Seamus first. Is that okay, David?
That's fine.
Okay, Seamus, please. Seamus, you need to turn your mic back on.
A lot of what Bill has already put into place has had a very positive effect with the CERB and with the wage subsidy particularly. I mean, what we're announcing today are very particular initiatives. Firstly, what I've heard from all sides, whether it be labor or whether it be industry, everybody's talked about liquidity. I remember my first meeting after the lockdown with the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers saying their top 5 priorities were liquidity. So that we understood to be a priority. We heard the same from workers. So this is really important for small to medium-sized businesses. I think there's a perception that the industry is dominated by massive capital projects, big oil rigs, miles of pipeline, and in fact, it's dominated by small to medium-sized businesses, and that's roughly where about 85% of the workforce is. So concentrating on them right now is a very good thing. I'll bring the rest over to Bill.
Okay, Bill.
Really, I think Seamus gave a good understanding of what the key issue is for the energy sector. I think what I could say is writ large across the country, what we're seeing is that there are businesses across the country who need access to credit during a challenging time. And what we're announcing today is that the energy sector is particularly challenged, and that's why that's so important. The other initiatives that we put in place today, the ability to remediate orphan wells and abandoned wells, to reduce our methane emissions. These are going to get people working. It's about jobs in places where we don't have access to jobs. So I think that this is critically important for people in those places where they're seeing extreme challenges. And we need to recognize that we will have other measures talking about how we provide credit across medium-sized businesses and larger businesses. And there's more for us to talk about in that regard in coming days.
Okay, thank you. And this question is from one of my colleagues. She's asking, we know that contact tracing is important in the fight against the spread of COVID-19. Minister Bains, what discussions are you having at the federal level about using technology to facilitate that? And are there any conversations about using cell phone data?
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that question. As we've indicated, all options are on the table. We're going to deploy all the tools that we need to make sure we protect Canadians' health and well-being. Right now, we're focused on economic measures. We are evaluating different solutions with respects to providing more information to Canadians on better practices to follow social distancing, physical distancing, making sure that they take those appropriate steps to keep themselves safe. With respects to contact tracing, we're looking at other jurisdictions. We want to make sure that if we are moving forward in that area, that we also deal with issues with respects to privacy in a meaningful way. Still early stages, and we've engaged with a robust group of people across the country that are working on some early stage technology projects, but we haven't made any final determination in terms of what we want to support or move forward with. But we have incredible innovative companies across the country that are stepping up, that are thinking through these challenges, and we are engaged with them.
Thank you, Minister Bains. Mike.
Good morning, Dr. Tim. How would you characterize the COVID picture across the country, and what accounts for the big regional differences, say, between Quebec and the prairies and the Maritimes and stuff?
I think the majority of cases, as I said, are in the four biggest jurisdictions, perhaps not surprisingly. There's different variations in terms of the actual epidemiology. However, I would have to say that the long-term care homes or senior residents outbreak is in quite a number of them, and that's what's driving some of the unfortunate increase in deaths. So the bigger jurisdictions, and particularly right now in Ontario and Quebec. I think the March break, as I said, might have had some resulted in the difference in timing of some of the epidemic trajectories. Some jurisdictions have implemented measures and that hasn't actually got community transmission. So that some of the smaller jurisdictions and the territories, they've managed to pick up all the imported cases, prevented onward transmission, and did the contact tracing. So they're actually quite different.
And this is for, well, I'll ask it and see who wants to answer. Does this suggest that there's a different approaches we could take to restarting the country depending on what province we're dealing with?
Thanks for the question, Mike. And let me just say that the question of the economic impact of the lockdown was absolutely discussed at the First Minister's call with the Prime Minister last night. And all of the premiers shared the very diverse experience across the country and spoke both about the diverse approaches people are taking to fighting the coronavirus. And the call is very useful that way because people can share best practice. And they spoke about the different places that they are in flattening the curve and about how that was shaping their own views about next steps to take. What I will say is that we as a country, of course, need to understand that we are a huge, huge country, and therefore, understandably, very, very diverse. And as Dr. Tam has just said, one thing we have in common, though, is every single Canadian has made a huge sacrifice already in fighting the coronavirus. That sacrifice is starting to pay off. As we heard from Dr. Tam earlier this week, overall in the whole country, it is now possible to be, I think as Dr. Tam put it, ever so slightly cautiously optimistic that we are achieving some kind of flattening. What is so essential for us all is not to squander that achievement. We have all paid too high a price already to throw it away. And so what I can say on behalf of the federal government is we believe really strongly that we need to be really, really careful, really deliberate, and really thoughtful about next steps. Above all, let's remember that we've paid a really high price already, and let's be sure that the sacrifices we have made are not wasted.
Kevin?
Afternoon. This question is directed to Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and Dr. Tam. With concerns about the lack of transparency from China at the start of this outbreak, the COVID-19 death toll in Wuhan has been increased by 50% in a recent revision from Chinese authorities. How has the inaccuracy of the data and the suppression of information about the outbreak in China affected Canada's response to this crisis?
Let Dr. Tam start, but then I'm happy to offer a response as well.
Yeah, I think I've just been made aware of the numbers, and I think, I'm really keen to learn further about what that means. It's such a rapidly evolving situation, but I think it is important globally to understand the full spectrum of the illness. So I think not getting further clarification is important. Of course, we actually have to have that understanding from every country as much as possible so that it actually helps us with some of our actions going forwards.
Yeah, and I would just add to that first and foremost, the very difficult decisions that we have had to take as a country in response to this global pandemic are based first and foremost on Canadian data and on the Canadian reality. And those are decisions taken by Canadian political leaders, informed by the best expert advice we can get. Our job, our primary job, is fighting it here at home, and we make our battle plans based what is happening on the ground here in Canada. Of course, the actions that we take in Canada are informed by what we are seeing around the world, and we consult, including at a political level, widely with colleagues and partners around the world. Our Minister of Health participates in a G7 health ministers call, which is weekly. I have spoken to the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, who happens to be a friend, and I think the Singaporean experience is very valuable for us. And then just the final thing I would add is, because this pandemic poses such a threat to our country, it is absolutely appropriate for our response to be informed by the best intelligence we can get. And our response is informed by Canada's excellent intelligence experts, who are a very important part of the work the government is doing and have been briefing the government and ministers. And they, of course, work first and foremost with our closest security partners, the Five Eyes, NATO, and NORAD. And so the advice they give us is informed by the information shared and collected together by that community.
As a follow-up, just how is it best to move forward with all these things being what you just said, right? Of course, the data now you're looking at from other countries, including China, that relationship that you have with other countries when you're trying to combat a global pandemic. Are there any concerns that Chinese cooperation and lack of transparency or accuracy of information coming out of China could in any ways affect Canadian researchers that are cooperating with the lab in Wuhan, for example? Is there any concern about that in terms of combating the spread of this pandemic and devising ways to stop it?
Well, I think global collaboration on scientific discovery and research is really important, and it can be in any area like diagnostics, vaccines, treatments. So I do think that as much global collaboration as possible is important. And in terms of our research, I know that our colleagues at the Canadian Institute of Health Research, really the way that our government's projects are funded is really based on peer review and a scientific process that's independent. So I think we have to rely on the scientific process itself as to whether projects are worthy of funding. And I think, and many projects actually involve many countries. So there's quite a number of projects funded in Canada that involves not just China, but a multi-country approach. So I do think that if we're going to get to solutions fast, you still need that kind of construct. But the bottom line is that they are peer-reviewed, scientifically validated before funding is provided.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll now turn back to the phone. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Marie Vastel avec Le Devoir. Please go ahead. Your line is now open.
Oui, bonjour. J'ai une question pour
Marie Vastel. Yes, good morning. Thank you. I have a question for Mr. Regan and Mr. Morneau.
Mr. Regan, I was wondering about what further help could come for the oil and industry. Many were asking and maybe even expecting that the government do more, for example, by taking equity shares into oil companies, as the government did in 2008 with automobile companies. I'm wondering if the government is considering that, and if not, why not? And Minister Morneau, I don't know if this was related to that, but you sort of alluded to credit for medium businesses, so I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you were suggesting.
Seamus, do you want to start? And remember to unmute yourself.
It's open, and I've learned my lesson twice over. Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. I would just say that today was really, the focus today was on workers. I think that if you look at our initiatives in any sector or any benefit, we have changed over time. I mean, Bill has been making tweaks and changes to almost everything that we've introduced. So nothing really quite looks the same, because we're listening to Canadians, we're listening to stakeholders, and we're making changes where needed. Today was really focused on workers in two fashions. First of all, liquidity, to make sure that the companies that hire those workers remain intact so they can keep those workers. And secondly, with orphan and inactive wells, this is technical work, highly skilled work that we think can.
I don't think you've muted yourself, but the technology is muting you, Seamus. Let's pause for a moment. Okay, I'm sorry, Seamus, we can't hear you here. Okay, maybe try again. Okay. You said highly skilled workers. That was the last phrase we heard.
Yeah, and in speaking about orphan and inactive wells, yes. I mean, these are highly skilled workers that we think that it could employ upwards of 5,000 people. We'll be able to get them working right away because they're already deemed to be essential workers. So and it has the added benefit, obviously, and an environmental benefit in cleaning up these wells. So it's in keeping with our environmental priorities and our commitment to net zero.
Okay, thank you. And maybe now, Bill, would you like to answer the part of the question directed at you? And could we move there we go. We see you now.
The key thing that we've heard from businesses across the country really is that they need access to credit. We've got a particular challenge where businesses are either not operating or operating with significantly less revenue for a period of time, and they need credit to get through that time. So that's why what we've come forward with today is so appropriate for businesses. Businesses don't want government taking equity in their business. They want to find a way that they can continue in their business operations so they can continue to have the opportunities both for their people and for their organization that they're seeking. We've been working together, as Seamus said, with organizations in the sector, also speaking to people within the various provincial governments. And we think this is targeted appropriately. It's credit, it's on a commercial basis, and it will allow businesses, and businesses importantly in the energy sector that are critically important to jobs in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Labrador, to bridge this time to get to what we know will be a better time once we get through this crisis.
Marie, en suivi?
It sort of sounds like you weren't quite in agreement in your answer, so I guess I'll ask it again. In terms of the possibility of government buying equity shares in oil companies, it sort of sounds, Minister O'Regan, like you were saying maybe. Am I correct in understanding that in what you were saying?
No, what I am saying is that we continue to listen to stakeholders, to listen to their suggestions, to listen directly to them. I think myself and my colleagues spent most of our days doing that. We've listened very carefully. Some things we're able to do today. I know in the case, for instance, with Newfoundland and Labrador, there are further initiatives that we're looking at to keep the industry competitive, and we'll be working with them on that. And I think I'd also like to take the opportunity to speak to just how constructive our relationship has been with the provinces. I enjoy very good relationships with energy ministers and natural resource ministers right across the country, and Canadians should know how constructive they've been, particularly the three energy ministers from the three oil and gas producing provinces, Newfoundland, Labrador, Saskatchewan, and of course Alberta. They have been very, very constructive, and a lot of what we've been able to do, we have been able to do together.
Thank you, Ministers. Operator, next question, please.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question, is from Heather Schofield with the Toronto Star. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Yes, this is a question for Ministers Morneau and O'Regan. I would like to clarify, if I could, about what exactly the enhanced liquidity is. I've only heard some vague references to expanding the capacity of EDC and BDC, but what is it sector specific? It's on a commercial basis, but on what basis exactly? And is that the end of your help for distressed sectors at this point?
Heather started with Bill, so why don't we start with Bill too? Bill, please.
Well, thanks, Heather. So first of all, the broad picture, we recognize that there are businesses across the country that need access to credit. So that is critically important. The emergency business account is for the smallest of businesses. The credit we've already put out over the course of the last few weeks through the Business Development Bank and Export Development Canada is up to $12.5 million of credit for small to mid-sized businesses. What we're really talking today is about credit for those mid-sized businesses. And we start with the energy sector, where we know that, as Seamus mentioned, the challenges are very significant. It's COVID-19, or COVID-19, it's the challenge in the changing oil prices, and it's the decrease in demand. So these things together means that credit is very much needed for those businesses. That's why we've started there. There will be more that we need to do for credit across mid-sized businesses across the country, and that will be coming shortly.
Seamus, is there anything you'd like to add?
Just to reinforce the point that the vast majority of workers in the oil and gas sector are in small and medium-sized businesses, whether it's contractors or drillers or producers, smaller operators, people who produce drill bits and safety gloves right across the country. So, a focus on them is a focus on workers and ensuring that these companies remain intact so that these workers have jobs to come back to once we get through this.
Okay, so as a follow-up, could you put a number on the expansion of the liquidity?
Okay, and we're going to pull away from the federal briefing today. Leave you with the notion that the Prime Minister announced earlier $1.7 billion to help clean up orphan wells in Alberta. More possible credit to come, says the Finance Minister, for oil and gas companies who have been hit by a double whammy of COVID-19 and drop in oil prices, significant drop in oil prices. I will leave it there for you today.